The rain never stopped falling on Absolution, as if heaven itself wept over the town's sick soul. Cade McAllister rode into that cursed valley with a Hammond's noose still itching around his throat. He had been a rustler, a bank robber, and a man who once buried his conscience deep. But the real law caught him, and his only escape was a deal brokered by a dying judge. He would wear the rusted tin star that 3 other men had worn to their graves. The townsfolk gathered at the muddy crossroads, their eyes gleaming with something darker than mere hatred. They smiled, but their lips moved in quiet chants, prayers that twisted the air like snakes. The first night Cade slept in the sheriff's office with a shotgun across his chest. He awoke to a dead crow nailed to the door, its beak pointing toward the church. Every Sunday the bells rang, and every citizen filed into the chapel with bowed heads. From his window, Cade watched them, their hymns so low they sounded like a funeral dirge. He walked the streets at noon and felt the weight of 100 silent curses on his back. The blacksmith, the shopkeeper, the schoolmarm, all nodded politely while their fingers traced crosses. But their prayers were not for his protection. They begged God to strike him dead. Cade had seen enough of the world to know when faith had rotted into something foul. On the 5th day, he found a message scratched in the mud behind a livery stable. It read, "They dig beneath the altar," and was signed with a crude drawing of an eye. He followed the trail of tiny footprints and found a girl washing clothes in the creek. She was thin, with hair like dark water, and she did not speak a single word. Her name was Liora, daughter of the preacher who held the town in an iron grip. Cade tried to question her, but she only stared and pressed a finger to her lips. That night, another message appeared near the jail. "The prayers are a lie, the gold is real." Cade understood then that he was not just a hated badge, but a target. He visited the church during a rainstorm and saw the preacher, a man named Maliki, pacing. Malachi's voice boomed through the empty sanctuary, rehearsing a sermon about the devil in their midst. The devil was Cade, and the congregation's prayers would smite him like divine lightning. Cade slipped into the cellar beneath the chapel and found loose floorboards smelling of damp earth. He lifted a board and saw the glint of raw gold ore deep below. The mine had been hidden for years, and the whole town lived off its secret wealth. But the gold was cursed, for it was dug from a sacred burial ground of an ancient tribe. Malachi had convinced the townsfolk that only ceaseless prayer could keep the spirits at bay. And those prayers required a sacrifice, a life, a sheriff's life offered up each month. Cade realized he was the next offering, chosen by lottery, welcomed with false smiles. He confronted Liora, who wrote in the mud, "My father killed my mother for this mine." She had been silenced by fear, her tongue rendered useless by trauma and absolute terror. Cade's heart hardened into a resolve stronger than the hangman's rope he once faced. He would not run. He would tear the church down stone by stone. On Saturday, the day of the scheduled sacrifice, the town gathered in the chapel. Cade strapped on his gun belt, pinned the rusted star, and walked into the lion's jaws. The congregation turned as one, their eyes filled with hungry anticipation and holy madness. Malachi raised his hands and began the prayer, a chilling chant calling for Cade's death. The words slithered through the rafters, and the floorboards seemed to vibrate with dark energy. Cade drew his pistol, but not to shoot, to hold up a chunk of gold ore. He shouted over the chanting, exposing the mine, the murder, the lies, and the greed. The congregation faltered, their prayers dying in their throats as confusion swept the pews. Malachi screamed that Cade was a blasphemer, a tool of the ancient spirits here to destroy them. But Liora stepped forward, holding her mother's diary, pages filled with the preacher's crimes. She could not speak, but she opened the diary and showed the congregation the truth. Her mother had been the first sacrifice, buried alive beneath the altar for knowing the secret. The townsfolk read the words in stunned silence, their faith crumbling like dry clay. Malachi lunged at Liora with a hidden knife, but Cade's bullet struck true. The preacher fell across the altar, his blood mingling with the dust of his greed. The curse broke that moment, the oppressive air lifting like a fog before a cleansing wind. The town wept, for they had been sheep led to slaughter their own lambs. Cade threw the rusted star onto the altar and walked out into the rain. Liora followed him, still silent, but her eyes held 1,000 words of gratitude. They rode out of Absolution together, two broken souls mended by truth and violence. Cade hung up his guns on a cottonwood tree, and Liora planted wildflowers there. They built a small ranch far from that cursed valley, where silence became their shared language. Liora learned to smile, and Cade learned that redemption has a softer voice than vengeance. They never spoke of Absolution, but every spring they planted a new row of flowers. The gold mine collapsed in a storm, sealing the evil beneath a mountain of righteous stone. Liora's voice never returned, but her laughter did, a sound that healed Cade's dark heart. They married under a sky so blue it seemed washed clean of every sin. Cade became the rancher he never thought he could be, gentle and steady and strong. Liora wrote their story in a leather-bound book, a testament to survival and silent love. When strangers asked about his past, Cade simply said he was a man once prayed dead. But a girl's silence had shouted down the murderous faith of a whole town. They lived long, their hair turning white, their hearts forever young with frontier hope. The book was passed to their children, who read of courage scratched in mud. And in Absolution, the chapel was rebuilt as a shelter for the lost and broken. The new preacher preached forgiveness, and no more prayers were ever offered for death. So ends the legend of the reluctant sheriff who faced a praying town and lived. His salvation came not from a gun, but from a mute girl's unwavering truth. Thank you for witnessing this tale of faith, lies, and redemption from West Old Stories. If you believe in second chances, subscribe to West Old Stories Official and like this video. Tell us in the comments what you would sacrifice for the truth you hold dear.